Welcome back to our March session of Fireside Chat course on Basic Buddhism. I'm Anita Kazarian of the Cleveland Buddhist Temple, one of 5 volunteers in our steering committee who work together to bring these programs to you. For this month's session, we will be covering the 4 marks of life, how to see life to reduce suffering. It is chapter 7 of your book, Jewels, pages 125 to 135. As we continue our fireside chat sessions on Introduction to Basic Buddhism for the West and Beyond. A short questionnaire has been sent to you in the last email. After our fireside chat is over today, please consider responding to the questions. In the Buddhist spirit of interdependence and connections, we ask that you please keep your video screen on during the session while you're at your computer. Seeing one another puts the Buddhist spirit of interdependence into practice. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our instructor and our moderator, Dr. Tanaka. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. All right, good to see everyone. How are you? We have an hour and a half of a wonderful session. So let us begin. So as was noted, the theme for this session are the 4 marks of life, or 4 marks of existence. And it helps us to see life properly so that we can reduce suffering. And we have 2 great speakers. Guest speaker is Dexter Mar from Honolulu. And then an ordained guest speaker is Reverend Barbara Murphy from Portland, Oregon. So 4 marks of life and the 4 noble truths. So the focus is the 4 marks of life. And actually, these are the 4 teachings or doctrines that the Buddhists used to respond to the question, hey, you Buddhists, what do you stand for? What are the ways in which you look at life? And apparently, these are the marks or seals, as they are called in other circumstances, were the marks or seals that the Buddhists said were unique to Buddhists. So it's their identity. And so, and as to where to place this in the whole scheme of things, we have studied 4 Noble Truths. And then last time we did the Eightfold Path. And of course, Eightfold Path is part of the 4 Noble Truths. And because 4 Noble Truths are the mainstay of Buddhist doctrine, so I want to place the 4 marks that we're going to be looking at today in the context of the 4 Noble Truths, or specifically the Eightfold Path. And if you recall, the first of the Eightfold Path is what? Remember? First of the Eightfold Path is right view or wholesome view. Right view is how we look at life. It's almost like the Constitution. And so that's the basis on which we look at life. And so, but I want to just say that traditionally, right view, the content of right view is what? Usually it's the 4 Noble Truths. So what's the right view? And the Buddhist said, the Eightfold Path said, 4 Noble Truth is the way you look at life. But I'm taking the liberty of adding the 4 marks, which were related, of course, but they were kind of separate in context. So putting it together as the content of the right view or the wholesome view in the Eightfold Path. And so it's the Constitution, it's the basic principle. And these are the four marks. And since you have read the chapter, I'm not going to go into great detail because I think basically it's not very difficult. But the first of the four marks is can be expressed traditionally as all conditional phenomena are suffering. So it's not saying that everything's suffering, but conditional phenomena, it's kind of a technical term for a realm of unenlightened life. When you're not fully enlightened, um, uh, many things can uh, have a great deal of suffering. But make it more easy to understand, I have used a colloquial expression in English: life is a bumpy road. You know, it has good, it has bad. And so this is the is opposite to what I have referred to as life should be smooth. So Buddhism is saying, you know, our life of the road of life is really bumpy. That's the fundamental position. But we have a tendency to say, well, life should be smooth. You know, uh, why not have things go your way smoothly? But that is, the Buddhism says, that is your instinctual way of looking at it. Instinctually, we want things to go smoothly, but the reality is that life is a bumpy road. Second one is all conditional phenomena lack substantial entity. Substantial entity sometimes is expressed as the self, or you know, but basically to better understand, it's better to say life is interdependent, that things do not arise on its own and things do not exist on its own. I mean, this is very obvious. If you look at, well, let's say ourselves, each of us, we were not born, you know, independently. We obviously came from our parents, and the parents came from their parents, so we are connected. And so we emerge as a result of causes and condition, so therefore interconnected. Also, we exist interdependently because we often say without taking a breath for a minute, if you don't take a breath for in a minute, you'll be very, very difficult on you physically. And we need food, extra food, water, all things, many, many things for us to exist. So to say life, and the opposite would be to say, things should go my way. And so colloquially, life should be mine. But it's almost saying life, I should be able to control, life. But the reality is that when things are interdependent, you are not in control totally. Some, yes, but much of our existence is interdependent, which means that we cannot control. Third one is relatively easy to understand. All conditional phenomena are impermanent. So life is impermanent. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. However, especially when things are going well, we want things to go always stay the same. Life shouldn't change when things are going well. That's our instinctual nature. And that is when we run into pain and suffering, because when things are going well, it changes and you don't want things to change. But the reality is that things change all the time. And if you understand the three teachings and really practice it in our life and include it in our existence, then more and more you can see that life can be great. And opposite of that is that if you're not able to see it according to the four marks, then life can seem very lousy. I mean, not very enjoyable. And so I have come up with the easy way to remember. So think big, and thinking small can accentuate the the pain and disappointments. So think big and don't think small. Okay, so I want to also emphasize that thinking small is not wrong. Okay, the what was on the right, things should be smooth, things should always be the same, and things should be mine. And but these are kind of an instinctual way of thinking. As human beings, we naturally want to think that way. But you have a choice. In Buddhism, Buddhism right here at the bottom says Buddhism is a voluntary religion. And Buddhism doesn't talk about so much about the threat of going to hell or to be punished. Buddha says, here's what I have to say. Come here and see. If you like it, take it in and practice it. But the Buddha did not uh, threaten or scare uh, people, saying that if you don't do this, this will happen. It simply said, it's your choice. So what is pretty clear is that if you think small, always to the extreme, for example, thinking that everything should go smoothly, and when something goes wrong, you really resist it, you fight it, and you began to say, why is it happening to me? What did I do wrong? But the fact of the matter is, even for people who are compassionate and good morally and ethically, bad things will happen. So that's what the Buddha is saying. Okay, so eh, eh, when things really what okay, the point here is when you constantly think small, and when it goes to the extreme and you have no way to look at thinking big, it can really lead some people to desperation. And in my book, I talk about uh, I when I encountered a suicide in a in a in a train that I was on. This was in Japan, and it was such a shock for me because it turned out that it was a young lady, and I at that time I felt, maybe if she had known, Buddhism teachings or any other true religion, that she may not have gone to gone to this extreme of taking her own life. And so it's important that we have an option of seeing things in a four mark, in a way according to the four marks that can, kind of bring you back, so that you don't fall into extreme despair to a point where you can take your own life. Um, I demonstrate this in the chapter by talking about a famous story, book called Who Moved My Cheese? It was popular 25, 30 years ago, and I find this very easy to understand. So, in a underground maze, you had two mice and two little people living. And one time, they found a huge batch of cheese, and so they were able to enjoy it for a certain amount of time. But one day the cheese disappeared. So therefore the title, Who Moved My Cheese? And you have two responses. One that is comparable to thinking big, and the other one is thinking small. So the sniff and scurry are the two mice, and they are able to think more in accordance with big. So they understood that nothing always goes your way. Life is a bumpy road. And they understood that, when you when you partake of cheese a certain amount of time, that gradually it will disappear and that things will not stay the same. And so when the cheese disappeared, they were not confounded. They understood. And um, well, the interdependent is has to do with the fact that cheese is part of a interconnected phenomenon, and when you eat, then slowly the cheese will go. I'm going to leave this grade there later. So, on the other hand, we had Hem and Haw, who were called little people, but they were not able to think according to the four marks. So they were very upset when you know the cheese disappeared, and they said, "Why is this happening to us?" And someone is actually doing these difficult things to us, and they could not accept the situation. And because they felt that when things are going well, it should always stay the same. And they began to blame other people, and because they felt that the cheese was theirs, it's mine. Things appear to by causes and condition, and by causes and condition they will disappear. But Hem and Hall were not able to accept this, and they really considered this situation awful. They considered it lousy. So all in all, Hem and Hall were thinking so attached to thinking small, and so therefore they suffered. And they actually became very miserable. Obviously, they did not. I forgot to mention the fact that the mice, two mice, when they saw that the cheese was gone, right away they adapted to the change and began to look for the cheese. They took off right away. Whereas Hem and Haw, they say, well, uh, they could not. First of all, they could not accept the fact that cheese was gone, and they were attached to the location. They want to stay, and then, but nothing changed. They had nothing to eat, and they became hungry and miserable. Of the two, Hem and Hall was better because he began to wonder that this is not the right way to respond. So he began to follow the mice and began to look for cheese. And then he experienced two anxieties. One was that there was an anxiety of leaving what is familiar. I mean, we can all understand that when things change, when we are in a familiar situation, we don't want to leave. Then there's also the anxiety of facing the unfamiliar and the unknown. Embarking to find the other next cheese, he or she was not able to really feel comfortable. But after a while, Hall felt that um, uh, the anxiety of the unfamiliar or the unknown, little by little, he didn't feel the anxiety waned, and Hall began to feel kind of energized, kind of emboldened to go, to adapt to change and go forward, move forward, and he felt even better. And then, because of the effort that Hall made, Hall found another whole mountain of cheese at a station D. And then when Hall got there, Hall found Sniff and Scurry already there, and they had pot belly, and they had not suffered very much because they had adapted the change and found another set of cheese. And however, Hem was still back at Station C, still grieving to what had happened, and was getting hungry and you know, suffering from lack of energy and totally miserable because him was attached to what was and not able to adapt to the change. Okay, so that is the in a nutshell, uh, the two responses to the situation in which the four uh, people or figures, mice and two people, responded. So I wanted to kind of end early today. I leave little time for discussion because the content is relatively easy. Uh, One of the points that I do want to emphasize is that, you know, we all have a tendency to think small or and that is not necessarily bad. I mean, it sometimes, especially thinking that life is smooth or thinking that life should be mine, these are necessary in order to get ahead, quote, in the world. I mean, especially when you're young, you know, you want to go to get education, study hard. These are all efforts that are necessary in the secular world. So I think that we need not, you know, categorically say that thinking small is terrible and bad, but it's a choice that one has to make. So one of the points I did emphasize is that there's no threat of you know having bad things happen to you. It's your choice. But what we can say is that more you think small, more pain and suffering one will experience, and less so as you think in accordance with BIIG. Okay, so let me, any comments and questions? Uh, I I'm gonna call on some people because I knew that maybe you may not have. Okay, how about eh, how about Larry? Larry Gissable from California. Larry is one person who came to Buddhism when I was a minister at the Southern Alameda County Buddhist Church 25 years ago, and he has become a very devoted member of the temple. In fact, also played uh, leadership roles in the temple, and so I have been very happy that he has. Larry, can you unmute yourself? And okay, looks like he's
Oh,
having a hard
there you
time.
go.
Oh, there we
Okay.
go. Okay. Any
Trying
comment?
to
Any?
find the button. Um, that it's a what? It's a good analogy to summarize what Buddhism can bring to you, because what I was pretty stressed for a long time, and the practices and just coming to temple and getting a different perspective on things
Mhm.
uh, helped. And
Yeah.
you know,
Can
because
I ask? You said you were stressed for a long time. What was that stress like? What do you mean
well,
by that?
work, I had a
Mm.
stressful job like
Yeah.
almost everybody, but
Yeah.
um, I just had trouble dealing with it.
Hmm.
And then
Especially yeah.
the real
I'm
it
sorry.
really reached realization that what I had gotten out of coming to the temple when the company I'd worked for 10 years sold, and at 50 I was going to be looking for a new job, and I hadn't looked for a new job in like 20 years.
I
because I've
see.
been through a series of companies all with the same people.
Yeah.
And so it was before I probably would have been a real basket case, but it would taught me that, one of the challenges, you learn, you have to learn new skills. You go out
Yeah.
and learn
Yeah.
how to look for a job and how to interview, which
Yeah.
I hate,
Yeah.
but
So,
you just
in
learn
the
to deal with it.
in the four marks of life, so you were kind of you could have insisted on thinking that things should always be the same. And if
Yeah,
I'm sure that that's what we all think that way when things are
yeah,
going well, but life, doesn't go that way
right.
often. And so you were able to adjust.
Yeah,
Uh, So that's good. Yeah, good to
yeah,
hear that. And just like the mice in the story, Hem and Haw, they were able to adjust right away. In fact, in the story, they have their shoes tied and they have it actually on their hung on their neck. The reason for that is that it symbolizes the fact that they're always ready to go to adapt to change, put on their shoes, and then go to the next stage. Whereas Hem and Haw, they took off their shoes and get into the slippers and really kind of over relaxed and really settle in. And so anyway, okay, good. I
yeah,
didn't know about that
yeah,
situation when you first came to the temple, but um,
yeah. Well, what coming to the classes, I mean, I came out of curiosity and I suddenly felt like I was home
oh,
with
that's
all the people. I mean, it just felt like family, uh,
okay.
which was a big surprise.
Well, yeah. Well, that's great to hear. You never talked about this before that clearly, so I'm glad to
Yeah.
find out 25 years later. But
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
that
I don't talk a lot.
yeah, well, you show by action and not by words, so that's probably a, a sign of a what mature human being. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing that. How about how about Dave Brown from Las Vegas? I don't think I ever, talked to you on a one-to-one basis. So, Las Vegas, where the Raiders are now.
Hiding.
You took our Raiders from Oakland, but
I didn't. I
yeah, I
didn't.
know, I know. So, do you
You
have
can
any?
have them back if you want. Oh,
Uh, Not necessarily. Yeah.
I'm
Okay. So,
I'm a
Dave, do you
school
have any?
teacher. Yeah, I'm a school teacher,
I see.
and I'm retiring at the end of this school year.
I see.
So we're going to have a change, and one of the things I've done to hopefully not get frustrated and stay pointed in the right direction is I'm starting the Joju Shinshu correspondence course
Oh,
right
great.
now. Today's the first day. So
I see.
um, I I'm trying to lay the foundation to keep going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
The
That's
cheese is
wonderful.
ending.
Cheese, cheese is ending, but you're looking for the bigger cheese.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the mice and Hall, they found a much bigger cheese, and that's what happens. I think for to a lot of us, once you lose something, we could never have anything similar to it. But it turns out quite often that what you find is, better and bigger. And so, and then please remember Hall when he began to look for the new cheese, he felt more invigorated because he's adapting to the change and not stuck on the past. So the teaching gives us a kind of a sanction or allowance to move forward, even though it's a little, uneasy at times. But I think so. Dave, we wish you all the best. Kyogyo Shinsho is a text in Jodo Shinshu tradition written by Shinran. It's a very difficult text, so don't get too bored or frustrated. It is a tough going, but I'm sure you'll find some, nuggets of truth in there. So, okay, wonderful.
Okay.
Okay, that brings us right to half an hour, and yeah, I'm glad we got responses from two people to kind of substantiate what I was trying to say. And it's always great when people are able to verify, so to speak, the how the teachings work, and so that's wonderful. Okay, so the first speaker guest today is Dexter Mar. Dexter, I should really call him Dr. Dexter Mar because he's a pharmacist, or he was a pharmacist. He's retired now, but he actually comes from the Bay Area originally, where I grew up, but he spent much of his time in Hawaii, where he became very active in the Honolulu temple, Betsuin Temple, where I believe he even became president of the temple. So with that, he can tell us more about his background. And so, Dexter, can you speak? I don't see you on this screen here. Dexter?
I'm here. Hi, Ken.
Oh, there you are. Okay, good. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, aloha, everyone. I'm Dexter Mar. I'm from Honolulu,
Aloha.
and it's an honor to share to be able to share my thoughts in Tanaka Sensei's Fireside Chat course. First, allow me to express my gratitude to Professor Tanaka for his dedication to sharing the message of Buddhism around the globe. He truly embodies the precious causes and conditions of when a student is ready, a teacher will appear. And difficult it is to hear the teachings of the Blessed One, and now we hear them. I've been a member of the Honganji Shin Buddhist Temple in Honolulu, also known as Hawaii Betsuin, since 2009. Being a convert from Protestant Christianity, a Methodist, at the age of 60. More about that later. I've been on the Shin Buddhist White Path, and more about that later too, for about 15 years. I've been a minister lay assistant since 2010, and a adult, middle, and high school Buddhism teacher, as well as a temple board president from 2018 to 2021. I'm a devoted fellow traveler and a student of Buddhism. The topic today is very close to my heart, as I view the ennobling Four Noble Truths and the Four Marks as the foundation of the Buddhist teachings on resiliency. Dr. Tanaka's elevation of the Four Marks from obscurity to the level of the Four Noble Truths is very noteworthy, because I think that they provide the underlying principles from which the Four Noble Truths emerge, and the why Buddhism helps us cope with the bumpy road of life. My first encounter with the Four Marks was roundabout through a Berkeley Jodo Shinshu Center seminar, which featured Dr. Reverend Mark Uno of University of Oregon and Professor Mark Blum of the University of California. And they joked about being the two marks of Buddhism. And I was curious. And so I Googled marks of Buddhism to find, what these marks were all about, because that was kind of the first time I had heard about marks of Buddhism. And, one of the things I found was that there are 32 physical marks on the Buddha's body. Another was, it's defined as various symbols of Buddhism, including a Dharma wheel, banners, golden fish, etc. And then finally, the 3 or 4 marks or seals of Buddhism. Further curious as to the meaning of, what is a mark or a seal, I learned that a Buddhist mark is the standard, for judging whether a doctrine is Buddhist or not, like Dr. Ken was saying. The designation marks a principle as reliable, authentic, and universal. So the 4 marks define Buddhism. It's what makes Buddhism unique. And I have a share
Okay.
screen here. Okay, I hope you can see that.
Yes.
So in the way I learned the 4 marks, they were dukkha, anatta, anicca, and nirvana, which corresponds to the bumpy, interdependent, impermanent, and great. But allow me to explain my understanding of the 4 marks. I think of the 4 marks as the thoughts that Shakyamuni realized while sitting in meditation under the Bodhi tree, kind of his aha moment. And in that moment, he realized, not discovered, but realized that the principles of dukkha, anatta, anicca, and nirvana, or as Dr. Ken expresses, BIIG, these may have been the thoughts that Shakyamuni could not express immediately and later described in his first sermon at Deer Park as the 4 Noble Truths. So let me show another view.
Dexter, if I may just correct one pronunciation, Sanskrit, not anicca, but it's anicca. Cha.
Anicca. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
anicca.
you. So yeah, the again, kind of without the seals.
Oh, this is a pun. By the way, this is a pun too. Then, like the seals of Buddhism. Is that why you use the seals?
Yeah, that was kind of a cute graphic that I saw.
I love it. I already. I was very fascinated to hear about the 2 marks of Professor Blum and Professor Unno, and I'm glad they have a sense of humor. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so dukkha, or bumpy, as the old Buddhist saying goes, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Life is not about suffering; it's about dealing with suffering, and difficulties are, what you make them, and a change in perspective makes all the difference. Anatta, atta, or is translated from the Indian Pali language as no self. And my understanding is that there's no I, there's only we. And that is also expressed in another Buddhist teaching, Indra's net. It's a metaphor about how each person's connected infinitely to every other person or every other thing. And here's an image of Indra's net and how each connection reflects the others around it. It's also the basis of the principle of cause and effect, which is a whole other discussion in itself. So back to Anicca.
Cha.
Cha.
Yeah, CHA. If you remember CHA, then anicca.
Okay, anicca, or impermanence, is translated from the Indian Pali language as no eternal. And my understanding is that life is dynamic or ever changing. From a resilience perspective, bad bumps can change. Also, good bumps will go away. That's kind of like the cheese thing, right? And then nirvana, or great, is defined as a place of perfect peace and happiness. For me, nirvana is an aspirational goal of seeing past my own self-illusions, delusions, confusions, doubts, to realize what a precious gift life is today. Life is a precious gift, and my motto is, good or bad, each day is perfect. The good or bad reflects my own conditioning that produces a judgment that, wow, is is this a good day or a bad? When in fact, that I'm the beneficiary of this moment of life due to the causes and conditions of billions of years of existence and countless lives that made this moment possible. Especially here in Hawaii, we're reminded every day that the beauty surrounds us and that we so often take it for granted. My personal bumps have reinforced my understanding. In 2009, my son died suddenly in a swimming accident, which of course was a terrible, terrible bump for both my wife and myself. At the time, we were holiday Christians, raised as a Methodist, me, and as a United Church of Christ, Faye, even though her mother was a Shin Buddhist. Faye was encouraged to follow Christianity due to post-World War II Americanism. But to our surprise, our son Zach expressed he was a Buddhist in a college freshman essay, even though he never attended regular Buddhist services. We can only guess that his grandmother, who was a devoted Buddhist, must have influenced him through her kind, gentle, loving presence. In Shin Buddhism, we call such natural Buddhas myokonin, or a wonderful, excellent person. His guidance motivated our turn to the Shin Buddhist path in 2009. Our very first chicken skin, or Hawaii slang for goosebumps, moment was his pre-cremation service at the mortuary's Buddhist chapel, where Zach lay in front of an Amida Buddha statue. As non-Buddhist at the time, without knowing anything about Amida Buddha, both Faye and I felt a comforting embrace of our son as we took refuge in the Buddha. This led to further curiosity about this feeling, and we've been on the white path ever since. So this is a depiction of the white path. It's a Buddhist parable about finding refuge in Buddhism. It's a story about a struggling person scrambling about the bumpy road of life on the near shore, buffeted by all kinds of adversity. He desperately seeks safety, and a white path over a treacherous river is found, but seems much too dangerous to cross. Filled with doubt, voices of compassion and wisdom urge, trusting those other voices and to overcome one's own fears. You don't have to stay stuck, but changing the way you react to the bumps can open up new opportunities to grow. This parable saved our lives, helping us to cross the bridge of grieving, though it took many, many years. 5 months ago, my lovely wife, Faye, passed away after a long illness. Sensei Ken attended her 100th day memorial service on January 11th at the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. Thank you, Ken. Again, I'm heartbroken and grieving, though now I've found the foundation of 15 years of study and training on the white path to provide the refuge and guidance to cope with this mountain of grief. For me, Buddhism, especially Shin Buddhism, provides the way to be resilient through the support of the Sangha, the Dharma, and the infinite wisdom and compassion of Amida Buddha. I realize I'm never alone, although sometimes it may feel lonely. Throughout Faye's hospitalization, wise and kind caregivers work day and night to provide medical and spiritual care. Afterwards, our Hawaii and Buddhist Churches of America Sanghas have helped me to stay on the white path without falling into the treacherous waters below. So the 4 marks, BIIG, are like the bridge pilings that support the path, the 4 noble truths. Mark number 1, Bumpy. Of course, the classic fears are sickness, old age, and death, but also our current fears are about job loss, loneliness, politics, climate crisis, etc. What I've learned so far, the Buddhist principles that assure I can endure the challenges are mark number 2, interdependence. For me, as a tiny part of the fabric of the universe, means that I'm interconnected. And as humans, we're conditioned to think small or selfishly. This is why so many feel alone. The human life form is only one of many among our planet. A web of life exists throughout the entire universe. I'm not alone, though loneliness sometimes intrudes. And I need to help others, and resist the trap of my own selfish conditioning. For example, when I'm sad, I ask myself, is my grief selfish? And I try to inch forward. Mark number 3, I think of impermanence as the bumps eventually even out. This may take time and takes patience, and I must keep learning and adapting. I even wonder sometimes, is death impermanent? In our Shin Buddhist teachings in particular, the teaching of the Pure Land U-turn, that loved ones return to guide us until all beings are saved, is very comforting. Our Shin Buddhist tradition of remembrance and gratitude memorial observances to our loved ones nurtures my feeling of connection to those who have passed on and those living now. And finally, mark number 4, great. Not only, as Tanaka sensei writes, can be great, but is great. My view is to be present now and appreciate each precious moment. Again, my motto is, good or bad, each day is perfect. My latest bump has inspired me to further commit to the white path. I've decided that my next step is to train for first level Shin Buddhist priesthood called Tokudo. With my wife and son guiding me, along with many Jodo Shinshu teachers, I'm training and studying to qualify for the October 2025 ordination rite in Kyoto, Japan. I'm trying to think big. Thank you for the opportunity to share thoughts on how the 4 marks help me cope with adversity and nurture resilience. Be a Buddhist, think big. Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Dexter. Can you take, yeah. Well, I wanted I did not want to mention the loss of your wife in the introduction. I wanted you to share that with others, and but you talk about bumps. Losing your son at that. It's been a long time, but still, I'm sure. I mean, I cannot fathom what you both went through, and I think you mentioned the word resilience, and you seem to me to epitomize that resilience, the way you have handled even the latest loss. And so with that, I'd like to open it up for questions and comments, and we have a chat from okay. Igor, do you want to share the chats?
Sure. From Dennis. Thank you, Dexter. She says, your story is very inspiring. You have such incredible strength in your journey. I wish you well in your studies.
Yeah. Thank you. I know that a lot of people are just probably just sitting quietly because we've also shared, have experienced part of what Dexter has gone through, and it's not easy to express them in words.
And Jen says,
maybe, yeah.
Sorry, Sensei. Dexter, you're an amazing and inspirational teacher and all-around person.
Yeah. It would be nice if you can just say it, personally, and maybe hard to express it in words. So Dexter, when your son mentioned kind of out of the blue that he was a Buddhist, were you both very surprised?
Oh yeah, we'd actually taken him to Presbyterian, Sunday school for about 4 or 5 years, and when he was in middle school, and then we kind of stopped when we kind of decided that we would not, we couldn't um, you know, place our trust in Jesus Christ as our Savior. So we kind of stopped attending any kind of religious services for probably about 5 years before he passed away. So when he was, through high school, we didn't really attend, very much except memorial services at the Buddhist temple, once a year. Yeah, so and I had asked him maybe just a few weeks before whether, he had found the Sunday school experience, kind of worthwhile. And he said no. So, I didn't know, kind of his religious, leanings at all. But yeah, so it was kind of, it was a big surprise that he even, had that in his essay. And so that was intriguing.
Yeah. Okay, Denise, you have your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Dexter. I was curious, were you able to find out where your son received this inspiration? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, we could only guess that it was, the strongest connection was with his grandmother, who was a devoted Shin Buddhist. And when we lived with her for the first year in Hawaii before finding our own home, she had the habit of, praying and chanting in front of the home altar morning and evening. So he was only about 2 years old at the time, but that was one connection, as well as memorial services. So yeah.
Please, anyone, feel free to raise your hands and just okay, David.
Dexter, hey, once again, a fantastic story. And I can definitely relate. I converted over from evangelical Christianity only about a year and a half ago. And what's interesting, what I find interesting about your story is especially that term you came up with, that I was trying to find out what it was for the longest time. The myokonin, when someone, the grandmother, as you guess, or somebody lives and walks the path, and you just feel drawn to it, and you see the authority and the reality of it. That's what that's what you believe happened there. And thanks for sharing that, because I was wondering how you would explain that. How would you know this would be the path for you? Because somebody walked it and really personified what it meant to walk that path much more than he and you guys were getting at the Sunday services.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what sometimes like Larry was talking about, when you interact with the Sangha, the temple members, and you find, wow, these are really kind, nice, gentle, kind of people. Faye's mother was kind of always known to be this, super kind and gentle, kind of person. For me, being a Chinese guy from the mainland, when I, kind of first, especially when we were living with her, sometimes, she seemed so kind and so nice, that it was, it's not like my Chinese family, which is, more kind of rambunctious. Yeah, but I've come to kind of learn, through my, years with, Shin Buddhism, these various Myokonin stories, and yeah, that really resonates. That these Jodo Shinshu Buddhism's 800 years old, so there's like generations of cultivated, nice people, and that's the same here in Hawaii. I mean, there's that undercurrent of aloha spirit and gentle kindness and hospitality and those sort of things. And so I think those are all traits that have been cultivated through, hundreds of years of, kind of, walking the talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, if I may, Dexter, one question is of the 4 marks that you talked about, which is helping you right now to the most, or if you can prioritize one over the other, but or two, well, which how?
It's probably, interdependence.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of realizing and appreciating the support of, not only like the people kind of around me. I mean, the friends and family, at the memorial services, but also during the time of hospitalization, and then the kind of the entire universe, kind of thing, to know
I
that,
see.
the world, I mean, especially given our political climate, seems so nasty, but the universe itself isn't. I mean, it's just the humans that kind of spoil it all. But there are,
I see.
by nature, many humans, and I experience it every day by even all of your kindness and listening to the story and responding to it. So yeah, so
Okay,
interdependence.
great, thank you.
which-
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to get to Johannes from Germany.
Dexter, thank you very much for your story, and this was a very real teaching to see how you apply your faith, and like as I said, very inspiring. May I ask where you found these Myokonin stories, and if there are maybe literature about it? Or I have one little book in German, but I have not found much else.
I'd refer you to Dr. Ken, from Myokonin stories. I think there's like one book that I'm familiar with, but
Yeah, well, D.T. Suzuki has a well-known book on spirituality of Japanese people, or Japanese spirituality, and so that's I forgot the exact title, but it has to do with the spirituality of Japan, and he mentions Myokonin.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there also there's a book out of the Buddhist Studies Center in Hawaii, which I think it was by Reverend Muneto. He talks about Myokonin like people in Hawaii, and so, but you should look at the DT Suzuki one. They should be available in in even in Germany.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes. Yes. How about Reverend Nanjo? Do you have from Japan? You can ask uh, Dexter.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your thought. And it's really inspiring. As others said, for me, I agree with I love the idea of Myokonin too. And for me, listening to the Amida Buddha's Primal Vow enabled me to, broaden my perspective, including the 4 marks. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing.
Okay. How about I picked on okay, Donna. How about yourself from the East Coast?
Hello, everyone. I grew up in Maryland, and so we didn't have a temple, but my family was of Jodo Shinshu background. my grandparents and my parents were incarcerated during World War II. So there's great upheaval of displaced people and starting over. My grandparents were sent to, after the war, to Seabrook, New Jersey, and there was a Buddhist temple there. But we didn't attend temple because in our neighborhood there weren't that many Buddhists, but we went to Unitarian church. So I had a basic understanding of religion, but went to public high school, which was secular. But I was open to learning about religion, but it wasn't that important, although, I had a basic faith, I guess, but it was always being tested. So I understand this whole concept of the bumpy road. And that went on until recently. I was a caregiver to my aging parents who passed away. My father lived to be 90 and my mother lived to be 100. And then my husband died a year later after my mother died unexpectedly of cancer. So I went to the temple, Ekoji, which is an hour and a half away. And that brought me great peace. And so since then, that was 3 years ago, I've been learning about the Buddhist faith. I didn't understand it before. I could read a book, but it just wasn't tangible. It was just very basic. But as I started listening to the Dharma talks, I found solace, comfort. And this particular discussion is very helpful to me, Tanaka sensei and Mr. Mar, because it's something that I guess the 4 marks aren't always talked about, and it falls into place. It brings something more real to me tonight. So I so much appreciate what, because of the grief that Mr. Mar has experienced, I can identify with that. And also I mentioned before that I went to put my mark on the Iriecho, which is a large book, huge book, assembled by the Soto Zen American, Japanese American priest. His name is Duncan Ryuken Williams, and he brought this book with 125,000 names in it of people who were incarcerated during the war. And this episode has caused great suffering for generations, this historic period. And by putting my mark, Hanko, near my ancestor, my grandparents and my parents who passed away, put the mark on the book as a community, as an individual and as a member of the community, had great significance to me. And he assembled this book as a living monument to remember those who passed, and also for the process of the living to acknowledge the significance of their lives. So that happened last week.
Okay, Donna, since we're running out of time, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned the incarceration, and we often talk about, old age, illness, and death, but, there are other kinds of dukkhas, which include, meeting up with situations that we don't like, which would certainly include the, forced incarceration of Americans of Japanese descent during the war. And so anyway, I think we have to acknowledge that there is dukkha or suffering in all kinds of forms. And today, and we learned about some of you who have experienced a lot on a personal level, and many of your ancestors have experienced the incarceration. But hopefully with the teachings, we're able to face up to it and overcome it, and in a way that Dexter has aspired to do. And I think to a great extent, he has done a remarkable job despite his losses. And I think it's a testament to the fact that he has really understood the teachings and living it every day. So thank you, Dexter. Okay, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for sharing and for your insight. Okay, next, we would like to go to our next speaker. Reverend Murphy, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. I don't see you, but still, well,
I come up as flying fish. That's my Dharma name.
okay, hi, flying fish. Okay. All right, I still don't see. Okay, well, but when you speak, you should pop up. So anyway, Reverend Murphy comes from Portland, and actually, I had the privilege of meeting her last month when I went up to Portland, and it was wonderful meeting you in person and getting to know you. And she is, as she has told me and Dexter that more than being a scholar type, she's more of an action type, and she's worked with young people, especially, which is very kind of rare. I think a minister who's working actively with young people, which is one of the most important things we can all do. So, anyway, with further ado, I would like to present Reverend Barbara Murphy to all of you. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka, and hello, everyone. So I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I guess I'll start by just introducing myself a little bit so you have a feel. Before I start though, I really want to say I'm really responding to how deep people are connecting to this material. I think that goes to the strength of these teachings. Not only are they core to Buddhism, but you can see how they are really available to us in our everyday life, and and I've never heard of them talked about as resilient, but I liked that. I appreciated that approach. So I also come from a Christian tradition. I was actually kind of mixed. My parents were different traditions, and then I was raised a third tradition, and I was raised in the Episcopal Church. And I actually worked with the kids in the Christian tradition too, and I really devoted myself to that tradition, and it just was really hard for me when it just ran dry. I think Dex was talking about how it just didn't, you couldn't really say the words anymore. So that's kind of what happened to me. And I quit going to the church, and for about 8 years, I call it the dark night of the soul, where I kind of didn't have anything to land on. And in that time, I really developed a strong meditation practice. So I actually came to meditation first. And I think that's why I ended up in the Soto Zen tradition, which really their main practice, as I experienced that Soto Zen, is meditation. And the lineage I was involved with was Katagiri Roshi. I don't know, Dr. Tanaka, did you know Katagiri?
Yeah, yes. Well, he is very well known amongst Zen people, obviously, but one of the key people in bringing Zen to America. So, but I'm not sure that people here know his name. Yeah.
Okay. So then, once I got involved in the tradition, I took my practice to the hospital, and I became a chaplain. So I worked in critical care and mental health and women's care, which was actually the hardest part for me. And then after that, I did some work with hospice. So I was working with people going through very difficult times in their life, very poignant. And I think after hospice, I just went back to youth practice because I needed some joy in my life at the time. So that's kind of a little bit about me. But to go back to the teachings, I learned them as the seals, and they're really typical of Soto Zen. We were just given the words. We weren't really, you just don't know how lucky you are to have all these teachings that are coming to you this way to give you context. So I just got, there were 3 seals: the no self, impermanence, and suffering. That's how I was taught these. Later, I learned to, Thich Nhat Hanh connected nirvana and suffering together. So it kind of matches up to the way you're being taught, which is suffering is not separate from nirvana. It kind of gets rephrased as life is a bumpy road, but it also can be great. So they're not separate. So at any moment, the way I work with these is that at any moment, those 2 things are always available to us. It's always happening. And I think the way you presented it, Dr. Tanaka, where it was like the instinctual, we instinctually might go this way, but we can also look then for nirvana or the end of suffering. And then impermanence, which seems like pretty easy to understand. And I think we've talked about it pretty thoroughly here. And then no self is life is independent. Maybe no self is a little different in the way I understand it. We'll see what you think. So one of the things I noticed about when I work with these teachings is that, and what's been brought here is when we're talking about life has a big view, B-I-I-G, I always think of it as expansive. And in this expansive view, there's many choices. I know Katagiri Roshi talked about it as panoramic view, having a panoramic view, which has a little more possibilities in it than when I'm stuck into my own little view. And just like when you're climbing a mountain or so, and you're at the bottom of the mountain, your path, your view is this narrow little path. And you can't see much in front of you as compared to when you get to the top of the mountain. And then you have this whole array or 360 view of life, which is very, very different and has a lot of resources to it. That's kind of what I've noticed. And the other thing that I thought was really important was in this chapter that you wrote that I read on Dr. Tanaka's about the train incident. It's, how we think about these things and how we live them are 2 different experiences. So I had a friend who just recently had knee surgery, and everybody told her, oh, it's going to be very painful, and the PT is really hard. And I went to visit her after the surgery, and she said, I heard people telling me this story, but now that I'm living it, it's very, very different. I had no idea how painful this would be. I had no idea of the work PT takes. So that kind of lived experience versus just the, it's in your head. But one of the things I like about the conversation tonight is we're having easy access to that lived experiences with this particular teaching. So I think that's what we have going for us. So I thought what I would do is just talk a little bit further and then maybe open it up for conversation. I'm going to start with kind of, samsara is not separate from nirvana. So the bumpy road, nirvana is, or the life is great, is also has bumpy roads. I wanted to start with a story that I just heard that I thought was really poignant. And the example was, imagine that you're at a party and you're inside someone's living room and the conversation turns to, like, say, politics. And it starts to get a little contentious and people have this view and somebody else has something else view, and you're really getting into it. And now you're noticing it's kind of stuffy in the room, and you just see the door and you decide to go through the door, and you open the door and the door goes to the garden. And in the garden, the wind is blowing around and everything is just as it is. And it's not arguing with each other and not struggling. They're just simply living, blooming forth life. And it's not that the life in the living room is not real and the life in the garden's not real. It's just, it's a very different experience. And that's kind of how I feel about this. So one of the things that I was telling, I often use to describe this is when I had my first child, I remember my mom said to me, whatever you do, just remember to appreciate every moment. It goes by so fast. And there I was, I was a brand new mom and I was up all night and dirty diapers and crying babies and needing to be fed. And I was just like, that kind of threw me because I thought, how can you love every moment? I love my child, but how can I love every moment? What does that actually mean? And as I worked with that, because I just valued my mom and I valued her wisdom. When I started to work with that, both in my practice, but also in my family life, I'd be with a child and, she'd be up all night sick or something, or we'd be at the grocery store and she's having a meltdown. And I'd have to ask my question, how can I love this moment? How do I love this moment? It's an ordinary moment, but can I love it? And actually, what I eventually found was, because I loved my child so much, I could find that life is big moment in that not so pleasant experience. And that was really helpful to have that experience of letting the heart lead the way, letting the heart open up the moment for me. I eventually learned that these moments were as precious because I loved my child, and eventually love trumped the particular situation I was in. And then I could take that teaching or take that learning, and I would then apply it to a situation where I was with a very difficult person. Can I love this moment? How can I love this moment? How can I allow this person to be just who they are? Just like my child was just being a baby. Can I love this person just the way they are? Can I take a breath? Can I just hold this moment in a way and look for connection rather than to leash out or act from my small mind? And this is something that I'm kind of at the edge of my practice. At any moment, I have to struggle with this, but I love that I have something to work with. And this teaching allows me to have that. The second one the second seal, impermanence, I feel like we've really talked a lot about, and I don't know that I have much more to add other than I did notice that one of the things I noticed when I was preparing for this conversation was these three seals actually all work together. So when I look at, can I look at this moment and accept it for just as it is? This moment is impermanent. Is also the truth of this moment. So that allows me to look at this moment a little differently. The example I had for this was recently my husband and I moved to the West Coast. We're from Minnesota. We moved to the West Coast really right at COVID so that we could be near our children. My husband has some health issues, and I just felt like it was an important time for us to be near our children, or we should start to make that move. And we'd lived in Minnesota for 30 years. And what I wasn't prepared for was how deep my attachment was to my life in Minnesota, how we were connected to groups of friends. We had interactions with our mail carriers. We own a dog. We knew all the dog owners that we'd meet on our walks. There were all these little things, our doctors, our dentists, just knowing how to get around. These were all little things that we were attached to, but I didn't realize it until we moved and I didn't have them anymore. I didn't have that. I think Dr. Tanaka, you talked about, or somebody, maybe it was you, Dex, talked about control, wanting to have control. And my life really felt out of control. Not only that, but then we were all doing COVID. So that was just kind of added on to the, the sense of not knowing where I was or not knowing where to land. And I had this sense of this grief and this sense of loss that was really surprised me. But I really wanted to honor it. And it was COVID, so I was sitting home anyway. So I had time. And I really let myself feel it. I really felt the suffering of that grief and loss of all those life as it was. And what I wasn't really surprised at is how long it took to just let that pass through me. And even though I was moving on and that I was making some new connection, making new friends, I was still very aware of that tenderness of missing my friends. And then from there, I thought, wow, what about all these people who are in refugee camps? They've lost everything. And I started to think about other people who have moved or lost things. And Donna was talking about incarceration. I have friends whose family would have similar stories like that, and they lost a lot. They lost their education, they lost their credentials, they lost so much. And I started to feel a real connection towards them. And it felt like I really burned through something. Actually, nirvana, the way I heard nirvana is, the translation is to extinguish. And that's just how I kind of felt after I had really sat with that for a long time. So eventually it was no longer an idea, but I lived reality impermanence. And I learned that allowing myself to be flexible to the new ideas and ways we're doing things were much more life-giving than grieving over the loss. And that did start to take root, and I did start to move on. And I brought this story forward because sometimes it's not the things you expect to be big, but sometimes for reasons you don't know, there's maybe something happening that you can't move on with, and people can't see it, can't see that, because it's in your interior life. And the last one I'll talk about is non-self, or life is interdependent. And I think it's really helpful that it's brought to us this way, that life is interdependent, for us to start to understand non-self. And the analogy I had for that was from a Shantideva, which is a text I study, and he uses the body. So he said we should look at this non-self like a body, and that in reality, if you're walking down the road and you stub your toe, your hand naturally reaches down and holds your toe and comforts your toe, rubs it, maybe put some ice on it. It's just kind of an automatic reaction, but often we act the opposite. When we are sick, we say we are fine. When we're tired, we just keep pushing ourselves. It's like we're practicing how not to pay attention to our life. So in non-self is often talked about as interdependent. There's nothing and no one that exists without non-self parts. So we talked about that earlier as well. But I kind of like the phrasing of there's nothing or no one that exists with non-self parts. I got that from Thich Nhat Hanh. So when you actually think about yourself, you know, we're the food that we ate. We're the sunshine that we live, keeps us warm. We're the water that we drink. What about our language? And doctors and teachers. We're so dependent on so many different aspects. And Dex gave us the intranet, so that's kind of cool. That's kind of the same thing. So that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was talking about this.
Okay. Given that the time-wise, I wanted to ask one question. When you moved out from Minnesota and trying to adapt yourself in your home in Oregon, did the teaching of impermanence come up for you? I mean, obviously, I'm sure it did. And I was thinking of in the story "Who Moved My Cheese," Hall, when he went out looking, he felt attached to the uneasiness of leaving what was familiar. Then he had the anxiety of going to the unfamiliar, but ultimately he understood the impermanence, and then he found himself more invigorated by moving out, going forward. And so were there anything like that operating for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of getting to the end of my life. So that was impermanent. I was looking at that. And then, my whole family used to live in Minnesota, and some of my oldest friends lived there, but then they had moved away. They had moved to be near their children's, or they had moved to warmer climates, or they had moved, and my whole family had kind of moved away. So a lot of my support system was already starting to go. So even though it's kind of interesting. It doesn't have, the cheese stories makes it clear, but in real life, how it gets played out to me, it's not so clear. It wasn't so clear that we should move. I mean, we could have stayed, but it wasn't so clear that we had to move. It was a choice that we made.
Okay. Any comments, questions for Reverend Murphy? I wanted to, since there's no one raising their hands, I wanted to ask you about your work with young people. You know, it may not be directly tied to our topic today, but how is it working with the young people? You mentioned something about you wanted to be more optimistic or positive, and so you wanted to work with young people. And how is that?
I
Because
love working with young kids. For one thing, they're very honest and give you great feedback right away.
Mm,
Like if things aren't working, they let you know in their
yeah,
body language or whatever. They're very, and they want to know. And you know, the other thing that's really interesting to me is, you know, we minimize how they suffer, but they suffer just like you and I. When they, when they, when they can't go to their friends for a sleepover, it's just as the same intensity of suffering as
yeah.
suffering we do.
But specifically, sharing the Buddhist teachings or trying to impart that, do you find it difficult? Do you find that they have difficulty of understanding some of the teachings? And what kind of teachings do you teach or share?
Well, actually, that's one of the things that's been interesting about interacting with you, Dr. Tanaka. It's been kind of interesting to see how you do, but we do also, we haven't gotten a handbook in Soto Zen. We don't have a handbook. So we're teaching them, you know, why do we do the things we do, or where the ropes, you know, kind of ritual stuff. And then we teach them Buddhist stories, which the Buddha's life. We have bodhisattvas in our tradition. And so, and I always approach that as our potential. Bodhisattvas are human potential, and they love bodhisattva stories. And we do a lot of service projects, as the teens do service projects. We get them out into the community and experiencing and different traditions. And also we're looking at there's more things. We're learning. We're just learning.
I really think that even kids can really appreciate the four marks, especially change, change, interdependence, and even suffering, And I think it's good for young people to get this early in life. And, because, okay, Igor.
Yes, thank you, Sensei. Oh, just before I went into this class, one friend called me and she said that her friend's child, he's 4.5, they just found out that he has leukemia. And it's still affecting me now as I'm talking. You mentioned that, Reverend Murphy, you mentioned that you were doing chaplaincy. And it's of course, it's a long conversation. It's not death, probably the event of death that should frighten us, but the expectation of death. And I cannot fathom what a 4.5-year-old might be thinking. I think my childhood memories only started when I was like about that age, 4 or 5, and I can barely remember myself that age. I cannot even think of the parents, what they must be going through. So I'm not expecting an expanded answer from you, but can you give me just at least something that you would say to that family? Thank you.
I don't know if it's so much about what you say, but being present with them, stay connected with them. Don't shy away from making that call or visit. A lot of people are afraid to go there because it's so painful. Be present to the pain, but don't let it scare you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we want to thank Reverend Murphy for her sharing and her insights. So thank you very much. So great to have you. Especially, I think having representatives of other traditions other than Shin Buddhism is very much needed because this class is on the basics of Buddhism. Okay, so great. And we like to bring this to a close. So our great MC, Reverend Anita.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. This concludes the formal presentation for tonight's session. We hope you found it meaningful on how to see life to reduce suffering. The link for the video recording will be sent to you in a couple of days. Please make sure a use of it to deepen your understanding and for responding to the questionnaire. Our informal group discussions on the Nirvana Happy Hour with Dr. Tanaka and our special speakers will begin soon. It is not going to be recorded, and so it'll give you a great time to share your questions or comments that you have in an informal and a very relaxed setting. Everyone is welcome. The Nirvana Happy Hour is strictly optional. For those joining us in Nirvana Happy Hour, we'll take a short 5-minute break before restarting. But for everybody else, we look forward to seeing you at again our special in-depth discussion session that will be on March 15, about 2 weeks from now. You will receive an email with confirming and the reminder. If you don't come to that one, then the next time we will see you, we'll look forward to seeing you at our next Fireside Chat session in April, and that'll be on April 5, where we will cover Chapter 8 in your Jules book. And the topic will be popular passages, metaphors, and stories. Some of these passages or stories will be familiar to you. Others will be new. They will help us wrap up part 2 of the Jules book and give you a way of recalling and sharing the Buddhist concepts we've been covering. Until then, please stay well and best wishes for your efforts to understand the Dharma, both intellectually and spiritually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.